Facebook, we're live on YouTube.
Did you tell your friends?
What was that?
Did you tell your friends?
Yeah, I told a couple. My mom's probably gonna be honest.
Right. Oh, and your grandma's birthday is today or yesterday? Was it yesterday?
Yeah, no, my no one's birthday was recent.
No.
Mm-hmm.
So you're doing the same as Albert with your mother? You know, Albert mothers always come here to the chat and write, wow, incredible.
That's right. She's one of our biggest fans.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my sister too. My sister is like Albert. She made one of the worst questions, the most difficult questions is from my sister. Sometimes even I can just separate the grass from the straw and say, yes, that was my sister.
Funny.
Okay.
7 o'clock, we're ready.
Buenas noches a todos. Bienvenidos a otra ponencia más de Todos por el Mar. Hoy tenemos a Stephany Lewis que nos acompaña desde California. Nos va a platicar de los pájaros. Va a estar súper interesante su plática. La plática va a ser en inglés. Les recuerdo que la vamos a traducir. Bueno, se va a traducir en YouTube. Mañana va a estar ya con subtítulos. Para el que no entienda bien inglés, los puede ver mañana en inglés. Entonces, without further ado, well, I want to present our panel. Our panel is always with Pedro Baranda. He's our biologist, our home biologist. ¿No? Hi, Pedro. How are you?
How you doing? Muchas gracias a todos por haber venido. Les presento a Stephany. Stephany es una veterinaria que yo conocí en el 2011. Conocí en el 2011 cuando yo trabajaba en British Columbia, Canadá. Ella le interesó el trabajo con las focas, pero su especialidad son las aves. Ella en el 2015 se graduó de la Universidad de Tufts. Se graduó de la Universidad de Tufts y hoy en día se especializa principalmente en el rescate de lo que es fauna silvestre, entre ellos lo que son los pájaros. So very briefly, I just told them about you, when I met you, and how you work with me, and now I'm supposed to call you doctor. Yeah, and I told you your specialty is birds and wildlife. Ahora ella se encuentra trabajando en el Raptor Center de California. Uno de sus más grandes sueños ha sido trabajar con águilas, con halcones, con aves de presa. Y lo acaba de conseguir, así que solamente me queda más felicitarla. Congratulations, you made it to the Raptor Center. And, well, we're ready for you. Benjamin,
well, wait, let me start with Luis. Hola, Luis, ¿cómo estás? Adelante. He's from our panel as well. Hola, Luis.
Hola, ¿cómo están? Good saludarlos. Bienvenidos a todos. Y Stephany, very welcome to this. Very anxious to hear your talk, your presentation.
Thank you so much. Thanks for inviting me.
Very welcome. Gracias,
And gracias a ti. Benja, the mic's all yours.
Great. Thank you so much.
Hold on a second. First of all, Pedro, you are not supposed to call her a doctor. You call her a doctor, okay? Now, I'm going to tell the public how I met Stephany. No, that's a joke, okay? Señores, bienvenidos todos otra vez a una ponencia. Qué bueno que están con nosotros. Espero que sea de su agrado esta ponencia. Siempre hablamos del mar y hablamos de los animales que están ahí en el agua. Hoy nos toca lo que está por arriba. También de esto tengo muchas fotos y son maravillosos. Vamos a tener los micrófonos cerrados. Vamos a tener traducción o explicaciones al mismo tiempo de la ponencia. Espero que la gocen y ya saben, al final pueden pedir aquí el micrófono, mandarnos preguntas y de hecho yo creo que ya ni siquiera lo tengo que explicar. Todos se lo saben. Bienvenidos. Okay, Steph, go ahead.
Great. Thank you so much. So Yeah, I'm a veterinarian working in California right now, and as I said, I specialize in wild birds. I'm currently at a raptor center, but we get seabirds still all the time because we're right at the coast. So just briefly, what we're going to cover today. So I'm going to go through a few orders of seabirds and discuss briefly their natural history, some unique anatomical differences, and some common problems that we'll see when they're in rehab. But my primary focus is going to be how do we care for these animals in captivity, because that's where I'm coming from. I'm a veterinarian and a wildlife rehabber, so I'm going to talk mostly on what we do when they come into our centers and what their problems are, and how we accommodate their unique set of needs when they're in captivity. We'll discuss some different threats to seabirds, and then briefly talk about the basics to oil spill response, and then lastly, some ways that you, the public, can help seabirds. So I'm going to talk first about grebes. So these are kind of small to medium-sized, heavy-bodied birds. They have that long neck, and their legs are set really far caudally or back on their body because they're primarily meant for swimming, and they're not really the best on land. So I have a couple pictures next. There's about 22 species. They're almost exclusively aquatic, and they live in both freshwater and inland wetland habitats, but they overwinter primarily in seawater. They are seasonally dichromatic, which means that they look totally different depending on the season. So this is a horned grebe. So on the right is what it looks like in the wintertime, and the left is what it looks like in the summertime. And that's a common theme for a lot of seabirds, that they have this kind of really fantastic breeding plumage, and then a duller non-breeding plumage. And they're most of the time it's the same whether they're male or female. Again, they dive for their prey. They're really excellent swimmers. They can fly, but they're not the strongest of flyers. And their diet is primarily fish, amphibians, as well as some insects and invertebrates. And they are located worldwide. So this is my favorite part about grebes, is their little feet. So they have these lobate digits where each toe is like its own individual flipper. And the legs are actually flattened laterally. So, and then as they move their foot forward in the water, their upstroke, their lobes all collapse. And so everything's really streamlined to prevent drag as they do that upstroke. And then their lobes, the little toes, flare out as they paddle forward. So that helps them just be really excellent swimmers. Again, weak flyers, they take a really long time to actually gain flight. And then you'll see, if you look up videos, they have this ability to kind of walk on the water, like these two are, and that's kind of a breeding and mating ritual, that they'll paddle very quickly and kind of look like they're walking on the water. And then this is what they look like on the lower left here, what they look like when they're trying to walk on land. They're not the most graceful of creatures on land. They do this interesting behavior where they actually will ingest their feathers. And for a long time, it wasn't really understood why they did this. It's believed to play a role in parasite control, or it may actually help maximize their efficiency in absorbing nutrients by slowing gastric transit time. All right, so that's lubes, and then grebes, and then a similar species group of birds are the loons. So again, this is a common loon, and the top photo is a common loon in breeding plumage, and the bottom photo is a common loon in its winter non-breeding plumage. So there's 5 species of loon. They're only in the northern hemisphere. They are almost exclusively aquatic, and they are migratory. They breed in freshwater, and then they overwinter in saltwater. And they have a similar diet to the grebes. They're also a really heavy-bodied bird. They also have their legs set back really caudally on their body, again, because they are excellent swimmers, and they really can't walk at all on land. Right, so next are the tube-nosed birds. So this includes the albatross, petrels, shearwaters, and fulmars. So they're a really varied group, so especially in size. So you have anywhere from the 25-gram storm petrel, which are really tiny, and to the 10-kilogram albatrosses. And these are, or they're located worldwide. They are more prevalent in the southern hemisphere, and they're distinguished by this tube-like projection from their nares. They have really, really long migrations, and the wandering albatross has the largest wingspan of any bird on the planet, so it's 3.5 meters. Their diet also is primarily fish, marine invertebrates, and they do eat some plankton and carrion. They have actually an ability to, one of the few birds that have a really strong sense of smell. So that helps them locate both prey as well as their nesting sites. And they have, a lot of seabirds do have these salt glands. The persillariforms have a very well-developed salt gland, and that allows them to ingest seawater and eat fish from seawater without becoming severely dehydrated. So they actually secrete the excess salt through these salt glands, which actually kind of sit right on top of their head, and then it's excreted through their nose. They have these really large webbed feet, and not so fun fact, the northern fulmars, which we get off the coast of California here, have this lovely ability to regurgitate oils from their stomach when they feel threatened. It smells terrible. It's really unpleasant. It's actually used as a defense mechanism to deter predators, which us included. So the pelecaniforms I'll discuss next. So this group includes the pelicans, cormorants, frigatebirds, anhingas, and gannets. They are primarily fish eating, but some will eat crustaceans and amphibians, as well as some turtles and even other birds. So they're obviously most distinguishable by their huge distensible pouch. And it's really important to note that this group does not have external nares. They have no nostrils. So when we restrain them, we want to be sure, like, I don't know if you can see this bottom right photo is how we'll typically restrain their head. And we put our fingers between the upper and the lower beak so that their mouth is still open and they can still breathe. We never want to clamp that mouth shut for any period of time, or they can asphyxiate. The different species in this group have different hunting mechanisms. So the brown pelicans and gannets, I'll go back. So brown pelicans are this guy right here, and then the gannets, which is these two photos right here. This lower one is an adult northern gannet, and this top photo is a juvenile northern gannet. So those species both plunge dive to catch their prey, whereas species like the white pelican in this upper left, they actually will, in little groups, they'll actually kind of herd fish as a group into a certain area and then just dip. So they just kind of dip their bodies in and scoop up fish that way. Cormorants and anhingas, so this is a double-crested cormorant right here. So they actually primarily sit on the surface of water, and they'll dive and swim underwater to catch prey. And frigatebirds are actually tend to be scavengers. So it's very important. Talk about that. So very important is the subcutaneous air sacs in pelicans. And I just wanted to discuss that really briefly. So they make the bird feel really light. They make the bird really light. So even a huge pelican, brown pelican, they look like they would be very large, right? A lot of them are only in the range of 2 to 4 kilograms. So they're very light. And you can actually feel their air sacs throughout their body. So it feels like they have bubble wrap under their skin. Like you can actually feel the air right under the skin. And those air sacs are continuous with the respiratory system. And they're believed to act as shock absorbers when they plunge dive and hit the water very hard, and to improve buoyancy. Most of their bones are pneumatic. So I don't know if anyone's familiar. So a lot of bird species, aside from penguins and ostriches, but a lot of bird species have bones that are filled with air, or otherwise called pneumatic bones. And those bones are actually directly continuous with their respiratory system and their air sacs. So their air sacs are kind of act as bellows, and they're throughout their body. They extend into numerous bones, and are directly continuous with their lungs. So what this means to us clinically is that when we have we say one of these pneumatic bones are fractured, and we're repairing them, we don't want to do things like flush aggressively, flush fluid into that broken bone, which normally we would do, right? If we're cleaning an open wound and there's a broken bone there, we would want to flush really aggressively to clean all that out. But we don't want to do that in this case, because those bones are open to the respiratory system, and we can actually kill our patients or put them into respiratory distress if we did something like flush those open fractures. Another thing that we have to consider is that in some bird species and some small animal species will put catheters into their bones to basically serve the same function of intravenous catheters to give fluids and medications and things like that. So the medullary cavity of most bones are continuous with the circulatory system, whereas in pneumatic bones, it's going to be continuous with the respiratory system. So in that case, we can't do that. So with pelicans, almost all of their bones are pneumatic, and they have these subcutaneous air sacs over their entire body. So our only two options to deliver them fluids are oral, so putting a syringe down that big old pouch, or intravenous. So this pelican has an intravenous catheter into a vein located in its pouch, and so then we can use that to deliver fluids and medications. Other birds in this order, so cormorants, gannets, boobies, they will also have some subcutaneous air sacs, but it's not quite as extensive as the pelicans. So this is how we deliver oral nutrition and oral fluids to pelicans. So they have that gigantic pouch. So normally when we give nutrition to our bird species and seabirds, we'll do it with a tube. We'll pass a tube down their esophagus and into their proventriculus and ventriculus, which is like the equivalent of the stomach. In pelicans, we don't really have to use a tube. It's so distensible that we can use a large syringe. Just put your syringe all the way, and your arm all the way down into that pouch. It's kind of gross in there. All pelicans have giant pouch lice. They're probably like 5 millimeters long, and they get all over your arm, and their pouch doesn't smell very good. So after you do this, you inevitably get what we call pouch arm, which means that your arm smells funky for the rest of the day. Oh, I just wanted to show you different photos. So these are from International Bird Rescue, which is a seabird specific rescue that we partner with. So just to show you the different ages and breeding versus non-breeding in brown pelicans. So all the way to the left is a juvenile brown pelican. So they have that kind of sort of boring, just gray to brown plumage. And then as they become 2 to 3 years old, they get this, this is in the center photo, this is their adult non-breeding plumage. So they get this more striking white head, still have that gray body. And then during breeding season, they get the white and the brown head, and they will develop during breeding season this really really bright skin along their pouch. And then the American white pelicans have this funky little attachment to their upper beak called a breeding horn. And both males and females will get this. So it's this little keratinized growth on the dorsal maxilla, and they will develop it during breeding season, and then it will be shed off during non-breeding season. And so this is a cormorant. So just an interesting thing about cormorants and anhingas is that whereas most of our seabirds are actually waterproof, their feathers are very waterproof. They don't actually get wet. Seabirds really never get wet. But cormorants and anhingas actually do. They don't have that same level of waterproofing that most seabirds do, things like loons and grebes. So you'll actually see them, if you ever see cormorants kind of sitting out on rocks and you see them with their wings outspread, that's because they're drying themselves because they want to dry because their feathers are wet. So now you know when you see them, showing their feathers, it's not because they're trying to be handsome or fancy, it's because they want to dry. All right, so pelicans. So probably one of the more common problems we'll see pelicans present to a rehab center for are pouch lacerations. And when I say pouch lacerations, we mean pouch lacerations. So this, I don't know if you can see, it's this little area right here, that's that pelican's glottis. So that's the opening to the airway. There's a thyroid right there. So you shouldn't be able to see that because that's supposed to be inside the pouch. So this bird had a massive pouch laceration and actually did very well. So we'll stabilize them temporarily and actually just kind of staple their pouch closed so they can eat in captivity while we're stabilizing them for the surgery to have the pouch permanently repaired, which involves hours and hours of suturing and so hours of anesthesia. So we want to make sure that those animals are going to be stable enough for such a long anesthetic event. So that's why we'll do a temporary stabilization with just skin staples and before we put them under anesthesia for a more permanent repair. Some other common problems we'll see these guys for are a variety of infectious diseases. So we'll see Clostridium, other bacterial infections, occasionally West Nile virus, occasionally Newcastle disease virus, pox virus, influenza, and as well as numerous parasites. We will see domoic acid and brevetoxicosis in these patients. So that's from toxic algal bloom. So if you hear about things like red tide, those can affect our, a lot of seabirds, but especially our pelicaniforms. We can see botulism. Obviously lots of fishing hook and fishing line injuries, which I'll touch on in a little bit. We unfortunately will see gunshot injuries, as well as just failure to thrive or emaciation, just animals that have not been able to find enough food on their own. So this photo, this is obviously a very neurologic pelican. He's head pressing, he's down on his hocks. He's not mentally appropriate. So something like this could be what we see when they're presented with red tide, West Nile, Newcastle disease. Those can also cause similar signs. All right, and then the last group that I'm going to talk about is actually a pretty diverse group. So it includes the auks, and then things like oyster catchers, plovers, sandpipers, avocets, and then gulls, terns, and skimmers. So gulls are probably the easiest to manage in captivity. They're fairly hardy guys, you can imagine. You mostly see them a lot in parking lots and eating fast food and French fries. And that's actually, if we can't get a gull to eat in captivity, we'll start throwing them, you know, Cheetos and donuts and all sorts of things. And usually get some work, get some eating, and we'll just hide some fish, sneak some fish in there to get them eating an actually appropriate diet. But it works. And so we'll move on. I didn't include every seabird that we could possibly imagine, but these are some of the guys that we see most commonly, at least in my area. So really briefly, I just wanted to talk about how seabirds in general accommodate. So this is how they accommodate their lenses so that they can see both in the air and underwater. Because as you imagine, you have these animals that are, probably spending most of their time above water. So we're seeing in just air, but they're going to be doing a lot of their hunting and fishing actually beneath the water surface. So how is it that they can still see clearly in both environments? And aquatic birds really have kind of the most impressive ocular accommodating abilities of any animal that's known. And they do this in different ways depending on the species. So just to orient you to this photo, so this is a cross section of a bird eye. So the top is going to be what you see on the outside when you're looking at a bird. So here's the cornea here, anterior chamber, and then iris, a lens is here. Birds have a bony ring around their eye, helping it give shape. So that's called a scleral ossicle. So that's actually going to sit as a complete ring around, in the orbit around the entire eye. And then, so this is the back of the eye here. This is the posterior chamber. So this is what you are not seeing from the outside of the bird. So this is, kind of our baseline. And then on the right here, this is how penguins actually accommodate for seeing underwater. So they actually can flatten their cornea, and that helps accommodate and accommodating them when they're underwater. Whereas other species, so this is diving ducks, gannets, cormorants, and likely others, when they go underwater, they actually push their lens forward, and some of the lens actually squeezes through the pupil a little bit, actually comes forward and squeezes through the pupil and deforms. Because the lens, a lot of people think of the lens as a hard, firm structure, like as though it was made out of glass, but it's actually kind of gelatinous. So it does have some movement to it. So in this case, it actually squeezes it out of the pupil, and then that changes the radius of curvature of the lens at that point, so they can focus images on their retina better when they're underwater. It's crazy. All right. So we'll talk now about how we accommodate these birds in captivity, because they are very, very difficult to house in captivity over any period of time. And that's really, aside from penguins and some gulls and terns that I've seen, and pelicans can be kept in zoos and aquaria, a lot of the species that we deal with, so like loons and grebes and petrels and things like that, we really never see in zoos or aquaria, because they just don't thrive long term in those environments. And we'll talk about some reasons for that. But also just the facilities that you need to accommodate these animals are pretty extensive. So you want obviously large pools, and what kind of pool, what size of pool, the depth of pool is going to depend on the species that you're working with. Something like this on the left, this would be great for gulls, maybe some waterfowl, Cormorants would enjoy this. And then something like this on the right, this would be a short-term temporary housing for animals like grebes and loons, things that spend almost all of their time on the water. We do still provide them a little haul out area. You don't want them to not have any place to dry dock. And then these will progress to huge pools where they can dive down, at least 5-6 feet. And those would be the kind of pools that we would want for things like grebes and loons that, we need to evaluate their hunting and diving capabilities before release. And these pools also need to be kept really clean. So you can imagine these animals have a very oily diet. They're mostly eating fish. And so that really oily diet means that the water in the pools have to be kept constantly clean because otherwise those oils can negatively affect the animal's waterproofing. So they need to be kept very, very clean. And so this is something that we'll do for patients a little bit earlier on in the rehab process. So when they just arrive, they're weak, and a lot of these animals either can't stand because they're too weak, or they can't stand and walk because of the species they are. It's a grebe, it's a loon, and they're really not able to stand up or walk around for any period of time and kept on land, if at all. So we'll put them on what we call net bottoms, which is exactly what it sounds like. So they sit on a net, and that way any feces will just fall through the net and not get all over their feathers, so that they're not constantly sitting in their own feces and urates. And then you'll see that this little grebe has some socks on. So we will put little socks and other foot protectors on so that they don't get any pododermatitis or any injuries to their feet from being both on land for a long period of time. So these birds aren't meant to sit to dry dock for a long period of time. So we can get pressure sores on their feet from that, as well as just from the net. We can see some injuries from the net. Sometimes we'll also put some keel protectors, like this little Ready Duck has a keel protector to just get the weight off of their keel, which is a bone that's coming off of their sternum where all their the pectoral muscle is attached to. So we want to make sure that they're not constantly putting pressure on that. Otherwise, we will see some wounds on their keels if they're down for a long period of time. A lot of our seabirds are social creatures, so in order to help them feel a little bit more comfortable in captivity, we want to get them friends if we have any. If we have multiples of the same species or similar species, we will put them together as long as they're stable enough and get along well. And if we don't, we give them fake friends. So we'll get them a mirror to stare lovingly at themselves for hours on end. Or this, so this picture on the right, this is a northern gannet with 2 cement dummies that they're fake gannets. I don't know if you guys heard, this gannet's name was Nigel. And I think this is off the coast of New Zealand that they put all these this is not in captivity. He's a wild gannet. They put all these gannet dummies on an island to encourage gannets to nest on that island, and then only this one bird came, and he was by himself for years. I think a couple others came at the last end of his life, but poor Nigel kind of lived by himself with a bunch of fake friends for many years. But we can do similar things for our patients in captivity. Obviously, these guys have really specialized hunting and hunting strategies and diets, so it can be really hard to replicate that in captivity. So obviously, we can't provide an environment for, again, this is a northern gannet again, to plunge dive from 40 feet up in the air and dive 20 feet underwater to catch their prey. So because we're not replicating that exactly, it can be sometimes really challenging to get them to eat on their own. Pelicans are pretty smart; they pick it up pretty well. Cormorants are pretty smart; they pick it up pretty well. Things like the tube noses, so shearwaters and petrels can be really challenging, especially the tiny petrels that eat really small marine invertebrates. It can be very challenging to get them to eat in captivity. So because of that, what we can do instead, if we can't get them to eat right away, or we can't get them to eat at all in captivity, there are tube feeding formulas that we can give. Lefebvre makes this piscivorous diet, which is basically a powdered diet that we mix with water. You can add the salmon oil sometimes and things like that to it, and then we just pass a tube down their esophagus to their upper GI tract, so their proventriculus and ventriculus, and give that diet that way. This is it's very stressful for the patients to be doing this, and it's very time intensive. So in order to meet their nutritional needs, for many species, we might have to tube feed them every hour and a half to 2 hours throughout the day for 12 plus hours a day. So it's really time intensive, it's really stressful, and you can get secondary problems from this. They just handling them that much can interfere with their feather quality and their waterproofing, and we can get other kind of captivity related problems. Another thing we have to consider is their ability to ingest salt water in those nasal salt glands. So when they don't need their salt glands in captivity, so say we house a loon on freshwater for a long period of time, or an albatross on freshwater, those salt glands will actually atrophy. So then if we were to immediately release that bird back into the wild, that animal would not be able to concentrate salt as adequately as it was prior to rehabilitation. So we will often supplement salt while they're in captivity, or at least for the end of the rehab process, and gradually build up their salt intake so that we can kind of build up those nasal salt glands. Another thing that we'll have to supplement in captivity is thiamine. So just like any other marine animal that you feed dead fish to, you want to supplement thiamine, and that's because dead fish will actually produce a thiaminase that is not present in live fish, and so we can get thiamine deficiencies in animals that are being fed dead fish for long periods of time that are not supplemented. And thiamine deficiency can lead to primarily neurologic issues. And some other captivity related problems we will see. One is a big one, is very common in really all birds, but seabirds seem particularly susceptible, and that's aspergillosis. So that is a fungal infection. It primarily affects their respiratory tract. So we'll see on necropsy, if an animal has aspergillosis, we'll actually see big fuzzy plaques and looks, and it's essentially it's mold. We'll see that actually on their lungs and their air sacs. So for that reason, a lot of our patients will be on antifungals throughout their stay, at least while they're inside or in any area that has poor ventilation, because aspergillosis is everywhere, but particularly when you are indoors or in an enclosed space, it's very common. We will also see pressure sores, if they're not being managed appropriately on dry land or on a net bottom. We'll see that on their feet and their hocks, and as well as their keel. We'll see feather damage. That may be from the net bottom. It might be from us handling them. It might be from them flapping their wings and bashing their wings against the metal bars of their cages. We can also see carpal lesions or wounds on their wrists from them hitting their wings against the sides of their caging, because these birds aren't meant to be kept in cages. They're not used to that, and we'll see a lot of issues related to that. So this is it's a pretty long list, and this is all the things that we as humans do to threaten seabirds. So one of the most common things that I, as a wildlife rehabilitator and a wildlife veterinarian, will see are fishing gear injuries. So this includes trauma from the fish hooks. So I'll see fish hooks stuck in their wings. I'll see fish hooks stuck in their GI tract if they've swallowed them. We've seen fishing lines entangled around legs, entangled around wings, but we will also see things like lead toxicosis. So we'll see lead toxicosis from ingestion of lead sinkers, as well as ingestion of plastic and other, primarily lead sinkers. So we'll see that most commonly in loons. We will also see, obviously, ingestion of plastic and other human waste, unfortunately, which can cause some GI issues. Many of our patients come in because they're hit by a vehicle. We can see, obviously, habitat disturbance and modifications by humans. It's not something I can really measure as a wildlife rehab center, but we for sure know that it's happening. Pollution is also going to affect our patients, both heavy metals, pesticides, things like that. Over harvesting for food, feathers, and oil. Most of these birds are protected currently under the Migratory Bird Act, but we still can unfortunately see many of these animals being overhunted. Loss of prey items from overfishing. Again, this is also really hard to measure, but every winter we get a lot of patients that have nothing else wrong with them. They have no injuries, but they are just severely emaciated because they are just not finding enough fish. The fishing process itself can catch these animals up accidentally, so they can be killed or injured as accidental bycatch. We can see predation from invasive species, obviously oil spill, and there's foreign infectious diseases just from human movement that we can introduce to our population. So like West Nile virus was not originally native to the United States, and then it was brought over, started in New York City, and has spread throughout North America. So some other threats to seabirds that are maybe not necessarily related to humans. There's other infectious diseases that are naturally occurring. We can also have mercury toxicosis, botulism, and domoic acid. There's some thoughts on whether or not some of these things are actually made worse by human activity and climate change. Even if they're naturally occurring, some of our activities may actually be making things worse. So I just have a few cases that I'll go through, and just some common problems that we'll see. So this is not a seabird per se. This is a Canada goose, but just to show you some of the injuries that we'll see from fishing line, it's quite devastating. And when we get these injuries, they are often long term. So this animal looks like it's had this fishing line around its leg probably for several weeks. This is what it looks like radiographically. You can see there's a lot of inflammation on either side of where the line is, and sometimes we can actually even see the bone being affected. So the line can be so tight that it actually starts to cut through the bone. It's not uncommon. That happened in this instance. This is another Canada goose, again with fishing line around its tarsi metatarsus. sorry, there's going to be a couple gory pictures. So that once I actually got that line off, it went all the way down to its bone and then its flexor tendons. So these can be, as you might imagine, very difficult to manage. They're in captivity for a very long time as these heal, if they heal at all. These injuries can make these animals also prone to fracturing their legs even after you treat the underlying wound and remove that line. This is a gull with a treble hook, I think, in its patagium. So that gull was actually the person who found this gull hanging by its wing by that hook and line from a chain link fence, and it was just suspended by its wing for who knows how long. And this is a Brandt's cormorant that ingested a fishing hook and line. So we obviously were pretty suspicious when it first presented to us that it may have swallowed a fishing hook, because it presented just like this with a fishing line coming out of its mouth. And so what we'll do initially, we don't want to yank it out. We don't want to just pull it because we don't know what that hook is lodged in farther down its GI tract. So, but we also want to get this animal stable for the surgery that it needs to remove it. So we actually just tape its fishing line to its beak. So that's what that second picture is. And we kind of, we'll trim what we can, and then we just tape it to its beak to secure it. And this is that bird's radiographs. You can see it has a hook, and it's at the level of its proventriculus, which is the first chamber of its stomach, and partially into its esophagus. And this right here, that's its heart. So it's sitting pretty much right level to the heart, and so that's where we have to access for surgery to remove that hook. And then you can see some more metal things on the line farther up. So this bird did have a celiotomy to remove that hook. Obviously, as you might imagine, it's a pretty long and invasive surgery. Has a lot of potential complications, and it's a really, especially where this hook was located, with it being so far cranially and far close to the heart, it was a difficult place to access. But we were able to remove that hook, and this is the Brandt's cormorant. Just a few hours post-op, standing, hopefully eating soon. All right, and then lastly, I'm going to discuss some things about oil spill response, and just what oil does to birds, and then how, just so you can get an idea of what it entails to manage these birds in captivity when we have a large oil spill. So oil obviously does a lot of external damage, which you might imagine. So they lose their waterproofing, which these birds need. They need it to protect themselves from hypothermia. They need it to be able to float on the surface of the water. The oil will decrease their buoyancy. They will not be able to fly. And then they suffer from things like chemical burns around their skin and eyes. And if it's severe enough, it will actually cover their throat and nostrils as well. And we can see some instances of asphyxia from severe oil. So this is what just to give you an idea, this is what a pelican that is not waterproof looks like. So they should never, a seabird, unless it's a cormorant or anything, they should never actually look wet. They should, the water should just bead right off their feathers. If they look wet, that's abnormal. There's, in addition to the external damage we can see from oil, there is internal damage. They can aspirate the oil and we can see complications like pneumonia. Ingestion of the oil can cause significant gastrointestinal diseases. So we can see vomiting and regurgitation, diarrhea, weight loss. It can cause liver problems, kidney problems, reproductive loss, as well as actually blood abnormalities. So we can see anemia as well as thrombocytopenia. So that's low red blood cell count and low platelet count from even sometimes just short-term exposure to crude oil. So the immediate treatment when we capture these animals and they are oiled and they need our help, we don't want to rush to washing them. Right, that's what everyone wants to do. Yeah, it's oiled, we want to wash them. We don't want to do that right away because these birds are often very weakened and the wash process itself is extremely stressful. So what we're going to do first is we're going to remove that oil from around the nares and the throat. We're going to correct their abnormal body temperature because a lot of them will be severely hypothermic when they come in. So we want to provide some supplemental heat. And very important, we want to rehydrate them because they're often severely dehydrated when they present to us. So the intake procedure, when we get one of these animals, is pretty involved. We obviously want to get where they were found. We want to provide a way to identify, give that bird its unique identification number, possibly collect evidence of photographic evidence if there may be a kind of legal case and we want to charge whatever oil company is responsible for the spill. They're going to get a full physical exam. We're not going to just stop at, oh, this bird is oiled. We're going to do a full physical exam and see if they have any secondary injuries. We may do some blood work, just some basic blood work. Look at their red blood cell count, maybe their white blood cell count, their total solids, things like that. Obviously, we're going to rehydrate them, usually with oral fluids, but possibly from either subcutaneous fluids or intravenous or intraosseous fluids, and then give them some gastrointestinal protectants to protect them from some of those GI effects of the oil that we talked about. And again, so just stabilization before the wash process is very important. So we're going to hydrate them. We're going to give them some nutrition. Usually it's via gavage tube, so like that, the paisaje, cualquier, some of that, those formulated diets. We will assess and correct any other problems that they may have and make sure that this bird is strong enough to go through the wash. And this might take days, a week or more. A lot of these patients might need multiple wash processes. So maybe we get that initial wash and go, this bird, needs another week or two before we can put it through another wash. Again, because the washing process is long and it's stressful. So you need about 3 to 4 people per bird. So you have to keep in mind that all of these birds interpret us as their predators, right? So to them, they've been, they're in a really weakened state. They've been abducted by some strange naked primate and they're put in a tub and washed with dung. So it's incredibly stressful for them. Because of that, a lot of veterinarians now advocate sedation. So there are some injectable, oral, or intranasal sedation protocols that we can safely use in birds. Things like midazolam, which is kind of similar to Valium, butorphanol, which is a kind of opioid. So there are different options that we can give to kind of lessen, take the edge off them a little bit and lessen that stress. If I have to wash a raptor, so that on the right you can see is a bar now that's covered in crude oil. I will often place them under general anesthesia with via an inhalant anesthetic, but that's. It really depends on the individual species and how well that animal can tolerate sedation. So we do use Dawn, primarily Dawn. So it's a 1 to 2% Dawn solution. You want the water at 104 degrees Fahrenheit. And keep in mind that you may need multiple washes to completely remove all of the oil from that bird. And for seabirds, you actually clean the bird until the feathers look dry. So there is a point as you're hosing off that bird, if you have done a good enough job, you're literally spraying down that bird, and then at some point the feathers actually look like they're dry. And that's because you've established most of that waterproofing, and now the water is beading off as it should, like you can see in this photo of the pelican, and the water just sits on the surface of the feathers and beads them off. After washing, you do want to provide a warm air dryer. So there's some pet dryers that you can get. A lot of times we'll put them in kind of a big netted cage and spray or blow these pet air dryers at them. You do want to monitor for overheating, any signs of overheating, and you want to make sure that the bird is comfortable enough after the wash to start preening. So you don't want to be staring at it the whole time because you're going to stress it out. And they're only going to preen if they are feeling a little bit more comfortable. So they need to preen to arrange those feathers and really solidify that waterproofing. So pre-release, if your bird has made it to this stage, you want to make sure they are in good weight and body condition. You know, we don't just wash them and then put them back out there. A lot of times they are in rehab for weeks or even months to get them strong enough for release. They should be in good body condition. Their blood work should be normal. We want them to have obviously a normal physical exam, and they have to be functionally indistinguishable from any other wild bird. They should display any normal behavior. This is something we want to keep in mind, particularly if we get any of these birds in while they're nestlings or fledglings, because those patients are going to be a little bit more susceptible to becoming imprinted on humans or habituated to humans, which we do not want before release. Obviously, they need to be waterproof. And they need to be able to forage for food, avoid predators, as well as reproduce before we can release them. We do want to release them obviously into an appropriate habitat, and we have to consider migration patterns. So just because we found that bird where we did in May, it doesn't mean that come October, it should be in the same location. So we have to consider migration routes and migration times before we release, and even consider either keeping that, if we missed migration, do we keep that animal in captivity for several more months until that species comes back, or do we fly it to wherever it should be? All right, and this is my last slide. So just a little plug to how you can help seabirds. Really important, support your local wildlife rehabilitation center. So I put International Bird Rescue and Tri-State Bird Rescue up here because they are, as well as Oiled Wildlife Care Network, which is affiliated with UC Davis, because these are the folks that are responsible for those big oil spill responses. We do see some natural seeps off the coast of California. So not all of our oiled birds are from a massive oil spill. We do see just natural seep, and we'll get those patients in from time to time. And a lot of centers will manage these patients. But the really big oil spill responses, like the Deepwater Horizon spill, the Exxon Valdez spill, those are managed by these organizations, and they will get up and go to wherever they're needed. So they're really amazing organizations that I encourage people to support. Cleaning up your fishing gear. I can't stress this enough. Please, please, please do not lose your fishing line or your fishing hooks, please be responsible. Be responsible with your trash. Keep our oceans clean. That is, I can't stress that enough. And then support sustainable and responsible fishing practices. That's really important. We share our oceans with a huge variety of wildlife who really, they rely on that seafood. that you know that they rely on that fish and that source. So please support some sustainable fishing practices. And that's all I have. And are there any questions that I can answer?
Well, thank you for a very nice presentation. Lots of things that, well, I personally didn't know that a lot of birds had like a cushion to get in the water. It's, well,
Yeah, it's like airbag. Yeah.
it's like an airbag. So,
Yeah.
well, it's very interesting and very entertaining. Thank you for your talk and giving us your insights of everything you do.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, now we can jump to the questions. So, si hay preguntas, por favor, adelante.
Hey, Stephany, we have Juan here is about to go to college for a marine biology degree. Do you have any tips for him?
For a marine biology degree, is there anything in particular that I don't have a marine biology degree, so maybe one of you guys might be better at answering that question. So what I did, my background is I went to undergraduate, I went to college for, I have just a general biology degree, and then I went to veterinary school. And during veterinary school, I really focused on birds and wildlife, and then I did a specialty internship in wildlife medicine after veterinary school. So that's kind of my path, and it's definitely not the only path. So any tips as far as just for a marine biology degree? I'm not sure because I don't have one. So maybe you want to answer it.
Well, we ask you that question because we don't want this guy to end up like Pedro, you know.
It would be a very bad idea for him, you know.
Terrible.
He is at risk of ending up like me. Mm-hmm.
Pedro, no sé si quieras darle un tip a la persona que preguntó.
Pero voy a contestar, si quieres un tip para lo que es el estudio de la materia de biología marina, mira, maestro, toma en cuenta que va a haber muchas ocasiones que vas a ver materias que no te van a gustar. Ser biólogo marino no es tomar una tabla de surf en un brazo y el tanque de buceo en el otro. Ser biólogo marino implica muchísima disciplina, entrarle de lleno de las matemáticas y a la estadística y a sensores remotos y a muchísimas cosas, pero también implica una disciplina que al final paga a sí misma y es bastante satisfactoria. Así que mi consejo es, vuélvete terco y échatelo derecho al plato. Ese es un consejo que te doy.
Okay, one more question for you, Stephany. Is seagulls and ospreys have common diseases?
Oh, like, do they have similar diseases?
Yeah.
As ospreys? So ospreys are interesting because they are sort of a seabird, but they're also a raptor. They do have common diseases. We can see West Nile virus in both of those patients. We can see some other infectious diseases. I don't think, I've never seen osprey with Newcastle. They can both be affected by lead toxicosis, mercury toxicosis. They can obviously both have traumatic injuries, whether that be by fishing line or being hit by a vehicle. So we do see similar injuries. Just a thing to note, a pet peeve of any bird person is that there is no such thing as a seagull. You guys know that.
Here we go. Here we go.
There's a huge variety of gull species, but not one of them is actually called a seagull.
You're entering the same polemic of biologists.
Okay.
There is no such a thing as a starfish.
Yeah.
It's a, yeah. Matter of words.
If you keep talking like that, I'm gonna mute you both, okay?
Sorry, dude. It's not time.
But this
I have a question for you, Stephany, if you don't mind. It's very fast. In all my years interacting with marine animals, every time I catch for one reason or the other, most of the time is for a rehab and release, a lot of fishing hooks, a lot of fishing nets, and all that. The common denominator is a very bad smell, like a roach nest, specifically a roach nest from practically cormorants, pelicans. Wow, frigate birds are so stinky, and it's practically the same smell. What's that?
You mean even like healthy, the birds that are healthy have the same smell?
The one that just snatched the fish from my hand has a very bad smell.
They have their urates do have a really strong odor, and there's a lot of them. They just their feces and urates are particularly foul smelling, and I'm guessing it's just from their diet because they're primarily fish eating diet. I don't know why they are really extra stinky. I mean, pelicans. People look at pelicans and are like, oh, think they're so majestic, but they smell terrible. They smell. The inside of their mouth smells awful. I don't really know that I have a specific answer for that, other than just based on their diet.
And the other question is also at the Yucatan Peninsula and in the Bahamas, all the problems we had with pelicans, most of the time was because they had a ripped pouch. How true, everybody told me this, I never saw that, is because they got attacked by the frigate birds trying to steal their catch. How true is that?
The pouch laceration? I don't know. I don't. A lot of what I hear from the vet at International Bird Rescue is that she often suspects that it's intentional, that like fishermen may be actually slashing their pouches because they don't want them stealing fish from them. I've also read that it may be from fishing hooks, so they get a fishing hook stuck in their pouch, and then the line's attached to something, and then it pulls and rips. So that's where we think that they are getting their lacerations for the most part. It's also possible that they could be, ingesting something, having something inside their pouch that is sharp and causing those lacerations.
Crap.
But, maybe, yeah. But we suspect that they're usually anthropogenic, that they're from human activity.
Stephany, we have found the public. Somebody want to ask you, as I'm going to give him the microphone. Christian, por favor.
Hi, Stephany. First of all, amazing speak you have right here. I'm also a veterinarian, and like you said, like Pedro said, I used to work a long time ago with in the Yucatan Peninsula in Quintana Roo with rescue animals, and also we saw a lot of pelicans with lacerations in the pouch because of that. Because a lot of fishermen used to when the bird stole the fish, they used to pull the line, and the it's very, very thin, so it gets lacerated very fast. I want to ask a question. What kind of suture you use for that injury? You used to do like invaginant suture for that to make like a bigger surface of contact. What would you recommend to help them do better?
Yeah. Nice to meet you. Thank you so much. I agree. We would do. And Dr. Dewar has some textbooks or papers written on how she recommends doing these, because she does them more than anybody. So yeah, we do a horizontal mattress pattern. So you obviously want to debride the area and freshen all of those edges, remove any necrotic tissue, and then you're going to suture the pouch in 2 separate layers. So the inside, basically the inside layer, you want to kind of sort of invert the suture so that you have that more contact, and then you do an everting horizontal mattress on the outside layer. So yeah, that's exactly right. That's what we do too.
It's like when you are stitching like stomach or something in like gastrointestinal, right?
Yeah, similar. Yeah, sometimes with stomach you can just do like simple continuous, but we always do some kind of everting or inverting pattern for these.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
¿Vas, Pedro?
See, I have a few questions here on Facebook. Okay. Hi, from Maffer Dobler. Hi, first of all, thank you for a great work and contribution. My question is, do they lose their feathers after the washes? And how long does it take to grow back?
That is a very good question. So they don't lose their feathers from the wash process itself. At least they're not supposed to, unless you're doing a terrible job and you're accidentally breaking or ripping out feathers. And so I can't really give you a specific answer. So if they do, so say a feather is traumatically plucked, which we have to do when we prepare a bird for surgery. We'll actually pluck out some feathers. Those feathers usually grow, and if it's just a body feather, like a contour feather or a down feather, those will usually grow back within just a few weeks. It does depend on the species and the size of the bird and how metabolically healthy they are, because it is a metabolically draining process to grow feathers. But most of the time you'll at least start to see some feather regrowth in 2 or 3 weeks, and then it should be completely grown within a month or two. Again, it depends on the kind of feather and how long it is. If a bird loses a major flight feather, so they, one of the big primary flight feathers on their wings or a big feather on their tail, those do take a little bit longer to grow in. They may take a month or two, depending on the species and obviously their general health. If they traumatically lose a flight feather on their wings, like a big primary or secondary flight feather, you do risk actually those feathers not growing back because you can damage the feather follicle. Especially those major flight feathers, they're actually attached to the periosteum, so they're attached to the bone. It's actually quite a lot of trauma to pull those feathers. It's not 100% that they won't grow back. There is just some risk that they don't grow back. As far as normal molting patterns, it's different with every bird species. So some birds may molt every feather once a year. Some seabird species will do like a dump molt where they'll suddenly molt all their feathers and they're actually not flighted for a period of time. Whereas most species will gradually molt their feathers out. And there's some species like owls, they take, usually it's 3 years before every feather has been molted out. So they'll it's a gradual.
Wow, that's a long time. Then I never thought it was such a long time for feathers to grow. Well, something to keep in mind next time you manipulate the bird.
To eventually molt out and regrow. But once they fall out, it's usually on the matter of weeks. But sorry, it's a very good question. It has a complicated answer.
Pedro, ¿tienes otras?
Yep.
Vas.
What a very interesting talk. That is from Zuleta Andrade. My question is, what are the main healing centers for birds in Canada, in America? And are the birds' migrations being followed carefully between Mexico, USA, and Canada together?
Can you repeat, what's the main healing, like the
center? What's the main rehabilitation center, the States?
In the United States, so there's actually a huge number of them. So there's everything from small home wildlife rehab centers, which might be just out of an individual's home, and there's multiple of those in every state. Two bigger centers like the ones that I've worked at, and some of the ones that are on the screen there. So they're really throughout the country. We have California Wildlife Center. I'm at Ojai Raptor Center right now. The California Raptor Center is farther up north out of Davis. International Bird Rescue actually has 2 centers. They are in Los Angeles and the San Pedro area, and they have one in the Bay Area in Sausalito. Minnesota Raptor Center is the big center. They do primarily raptors. They're in Minneapolis, St. Paul area. Wildlife Rehab Center in Minnesota is also in that same area. Yeah, there's a lot of them. So I mean, if anyone's interested in centers in a particular area that do internships and things like that, they can feel free to contact me because I can put them in touch if anyone's interested in working with these centers. Not all wildlife rehab centers have a vet on staff. It's mostly just these bigger centers. And the smaller centers will use usually like a volunteer vet, which may be a local small animal veterinarian who usually donates at least partially donates their services to a wildlife rehab center. And sorry, the other part of the question was migration. Yeah, there are a huge number of biologists who study migration patterns of all these species, and so there are some birds that are banded and they're tracked that way. There are some that have like GPS kind of packs and are tracked that way. So it's definitely a huge area of research is tracking with migration patterns and just bird biology. Does that answer your question?
Yep, basically yes.
Okay, we have a couple of questions over here. What happens when a seabird with an injury never heals?
If a seabird with an injury does not heal, which unfortunately does happen, we usually recommend humane euthanasia, unfortunately, particularly with some of these species that are really hard to manage in captivity and severely stressed in captivity and get all those captivity related problems that I talked about, because they just don't thrive in captivity for their entire lives. So they unfortunately will be humanely euthanized. If it is a species that does okay in captivity, and we think we can place it at a zoo or sanctuary or something like that, or aquarium, we will do that in those cases. But we think about it a long time before we commit to that, because we want to make sure that that animal will thrive in captivity. But in other instances, we will humanely euthanize them, and that's just done with an overdose of anesthesia.
Okay, that brings one question I have. After you save them, you heal them, you feed them, you bait them, you air dry them, do they still think you are a predator?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, they hate us forever. But there are some species that will kind of get a little bit used to us and associate us with food, like cormorants will do that, especially if they're young. The younger seabirds are a little bit easier to habituate, but for the most part, yeah, they hate us. And then we release them and they're like, see ya. They don't look back, they don't say thank you. But that's how we prefer it. We want them to associate with us as predators, because then that is their appropriate behavior in the wild, and that will help protect them from other predators as well as from humans that are not as nice as we are. So
Pedro,
okay, I have a few questions here. Well, one that is a very fast, very quick for you. What is your favorite bird?
My favorite bird, I really like red-tailed hawks. That's not a seabird, but I really I like red-tailed hawks. They're very hardy. They're really nice to work with. That's probably my other favorite bird are turkey vultures. I love turkey vultures.
Why? They puke all over you. They are mean.
They puke all over you. but they're really important. They're really important for the ecosystem. They're the recyclers of the earth. You know, they help eliminate the earth of, you know, carrion that may, you know, carry disease and things like that. Yeah, they're really cool and very hardy birds.
Okay. Jose Luis Tello asks, why cannot some birds fly if they get the body wet? As fragatas, for example, frigate bird.
If they actually get wet, because they'll be too heavy. So like the seabirds are, most of them are completely waterproof, and that way, when once they're flighted, their bodies are not holding on to any water. So if they get truly wet, they're too heavy, and then if their flight feathers will not hold the same shape and orientation that they need to be able to really give them lift.
Other question. What is a proper procedure for a regular civilian mariner on the US or Mexico or international waters to rescue an animal? What authorities must one contact, and may they instruct you over radio how to handle the situation? Is there a protocol? In other words, I'm driving around on my boat. I see a pelican that needs help, and there's no one else around for miles. What do I do? Who do I call?
That is a great question. So you can, as a member of the public, you see a seabird in need, you can personally, if you can rescue that animal, you can. It's not quite as strict as like with the marine mammals and sea turtles, where NOAA has more strict. You can't touch it, you can't get anywhere near it. If a seabird needs help and you can safely capture it, you can do that. The governing body, at least in the United States, I'm not really familiar with other countries. In the United States, the governing body for seabirds is the Fish and Wildlife Service. So you would contact your local Fish and Wildlife Service, and then they would be able to put you in contact with a wildlife rehabilitator closest to you. Your other option would be to Google and find the wildlife rehabilitator that's near you, and they can also help give you instructions on how to safely for you and for the bird capture that bird and transport it. Yeah, that would be my best advice. So and how you capture it is going to depend on the species, obviously, but something to just keep in mind for all of them is that once you do capture it, and you want the capture process itself to be as low stress and quick as possible. And once you capture it, I recommended putting it in an enclosure and covering the sides. Like if you have a sheet or something that you can throw over the crate or the box that you have it in, to please do that, just to help minimize the visual stimuli that animal sees, so that they're kept a little bit calm. You don't want to have it exposed in the crate and surrounded by people staring at it, because that will cause a lot of stress.
There's one last question here on Facebook. The same person that asked you about the procedure, the protocol of rescue, is asking if you're familiar with the sound-tailed hawk. They are endemic only of Central Texas, and they're supposed to be cousins of the red-tailed hawk.
What's the name of the bird again?
It's the sound-tailed hawk.
Sawtail?
Sound. C-O-N-E-D.
Song or sound?
Sound. C-O-N-E-D.
C-O-N-E-D?
Mm-hmm. According to this, is endemic from Central Texas. I never heard about that bird before.
C as in cat? O-N-E-Z?
C as in zebra.
Oh, Z.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, zone-tailed hawk. Yes. I have not worked with them before. I haven't really done much work in Texas. but I have heard of them before. Do they have a specific question about them?
If you have heard about them, that's all. Maybe you can tell us a little about. You can tell him a little about this bird in particular.
Yeah, I have not worked with them in particular because I haven't done much work in that area. I don't think they're a species of major concern. I don't think they're vulnerable or threatened or anything like that. And they're buteos. So they are related to red-tailed hawks and red-shouldered hawks and things like that. So as far as management in captivity, I think it would be very similar to how I would manage any of those other similar raptors. But I don't have any personal experience with that particular species.
Okay. I have no more questions from Facebook.
I'm finished here in YouTube. I don't have questions in YouTube. So, Benka, do you have anything more?
No question over here. So.
Okay, you had a personal question, Benka. You can go ahead.
Well, I wanted to ask you what's the story with the Galapagos cormorant? Why can't they fly?
The Galapagos cormorant. I don't know. I don't really work with that species.
They don't need to.
I guess they don't really. Yeah, they really don't need to. Yeah, I apologize. I'm not really familiar with them. I've never had the pleasure of working in the Galapagos, unfortunately.
Les tocó verlos a ustedes, supongo, ¿no? You had the chance to see them, I'm assuming.
They have so much food in the on the sea that they don't fly anymore.
Yeah.
They don't have predators outside, so they don't need to fly.
Yeah.
Their wings became like this size, It's like feathers.
Little stumps.
They are excellent divers.
Yeah. I'm sure. I'm always shocked that even grebes can fly, because you look at their wings; they're super tiny and stubby, and they are really, really heavy-bodied, dense little birds. But somehow they fly. But it takes them a really long time to actually get lift and get off the water. So maybe in a few years they won't be able to fly.
Yeah, they're too close to that step.
Yeah.
Okay, Arancha got some courage here to ask a question. Have you ever worked with a bird with an infection disease that didn't have a cure?
Yes, for sure, because a lot of viral diseases do not actually have a specific treatment. So even things like West Nile virus really does not have a particular treatment because it's a viral disease. Which we kind of know, right? With COVID, there's not really a specific cure, right? So the same goes for any of our viral diseases. What we can do if it's some viral diseases, West Nile virus included, they can actually manage, clear that with their own immune system, as long as their immune system is healthy. So what we usually do is support them, but nutritionally, provide a lot of supportive care, and then we may give them actually antibiotics to help prevent secondary infections, and sometimes we may do anti-inflammatory medications if the problems caused by that virus is due to increased inflammatory response. But yeah, so like West Nile virus we see all the time, primarily in corvids. I usually see it in crows and ravens. Pox virus is another really common viral disease that also does not have a cure, and that causes a lot of usually raised nodules around. It can be anywhere on the body, but especially around the beak, around the eyes, and then the toes. So that is another viral disease that there's really nothing I can do except give them time and see if they clear that viral infection on their own.
Okay. I have a question. You said a lot that the oil spills and stuff, and those are very harming for the birds. And you also said something about the oil companies being responsible for this. Is there any like legal action you can take personally, or I don't know, the organization that you do and where you work for, and what's the course of action, or what's the benefit for that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the Migratory Bird Act in the United States protects all. It protects native birds. So when we have something like an oil spill, and they are, we have proof that these animals are being negatively affected by that spill, and they're protected under the Migratory Bird Act. Basically, it's usually done through our U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and they handle like the legal aspect of it. And I'm not really super involved in this, but the Fish and Wildlife Service will determine what fines and what legal penalties that company will have because of that spill. And I know for like the BP spill, the Deepwater Horizon spill, that massive spill in the Gulf, they paid for the entire rehab process. They paid for the oil company paid for all the facilities, all the equipment, all of the salary for all the staff and workers. They were
Even the equipment and medications needed?
I believe so, yeah. Yeah, and the salary.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Luckily, so with the Trump administration, they decided to interpret the Migratory Bird Act differently, so that it became that you could only be held legally responsible if they could prove that whatever action that you did to injure that animal was purposeful, like you purposely shot that bird, you purposely killed that animal, and that accidental or incidental injuries or death to a bird that's protected under that Migratory Bird Act, then they couldn't be held legally responsible. That has since been, I think, overturned, and there's a lot of states like California decided on their own. They're like, we're interpreting it the same way. We're not going to change how we're interpreting it. So it should still be that, even if it's an accidental, injury, death or injury, that your company or you personally are legally responsible.
Yeah. And these companies have lots of money, yeah.
Tons of money, yeah. But, paying for
give a little bit to help the sea, just
Yeah.
a little, and the birds and everything. Well,
yeah, and they should be held responsible. And with the different Trump interpretations of that Migratory Bird Act, that would lead oil companies to no longer be responsible. If there was another big spill.
So in other words, you're telling us that according to the Trump administration, to be held responsible of any incident with bird, you're supposed to catch a bird, practically dunk it in oil.
Yes.
You have to, yeah.
Yep.
You have to do it on purpose.
You have to do it on
I love you, Trump.
Yeah.
I love you, Trump.
Well, what's purposely now? That's the thing.
Right.
That's the thing. You can purposely unscrew something, and it goes wrong, but it's an accident, but you did it purposely, so maybe it goes through. Well, I don't know. He's trying to help the big companies over there.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah. Not very environmentally friendly.
Benja, do you have more in Zoom?
Yeah, there is one question here. Are there like specific diseases in different areas, or are there any patterns for diseases in birds from different zones?
Yes, there's definitely geographic differences to what kind of infectious diseases you're going to see, and there's various there's different outbreaks at different times, so you're not going to always see the same level of different infectious diseases at the same time, both the same time of year or whatever. So like, for instance, like West Nile virus is when mosquitoes are most prevalent, right? So we primarily see that in the fall, late summer and fall. And we will see, sporadic outbreaks of different diseases. Last spring, so spring of 2019, and then it repeated in spring of 2020, we saw an outbreak of a sarcocystis, which is a protozoal parasite causing encephalitis or inflammation of the brain in Brandt's cormorants, specifically off the coast of California. So it was the first time it actually had ever been documented. And so my center I think we got 3 or 4 cases last spring, and we got 2 cases this past spring. And then some other centers nearby also had some cases. So that was actually written up and published because we got full pathology. And so we work with our California Fish and Wildlife Service. They have a wildlife disease investigations laboratory. So there's actually several biologists and veterinarians who that's their job, is to track these kind of different infectious disease outbreaks, as well as some anthropogenic causes. So they track, exposure to anticoagulant rodenticides and lead and all sorts of things.
Okay, they're asking on Facebook if the oil spills can reach for future aids. So they paid for treating the problem, but do they give you like future aids for future problems?
I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't think I have the answer to that question, because I wouldn't be involved in that. So I'm not sure if they give you money for the future. I think
They should.
Yeah, they should. Yeah, I don't know. I think the International Bird Rescue may receive some funding from those companies. I know they get a lot of funding from Dawn. I know Dawn gives them a lot of funding, but I'm not really familiar with all the funding everywhere.
I have a personal question. With all this coronavirus thing and people not, well, it started to fade now, but people weren't going out, and contamination in LA or whatever, it came down, but drastically.
Mhm.
Do you see any changes in migrations or something on birds that's different?
I don't think we saw any changes in migration pattern. People were reporting just species that normally may normally not be in a certain area because it's a heavily human populated area, because they're going to avoid really heavily human populated areas. That suddenly them being able to Yeah. spending more time in those locations. We did initially at the beginning of the pandemic, when we were on a more significant lockdown, we did see a huge drop in admits in new patients. And we don't know if that's because people just, we rely primarily on the public to find these animals and bring them to us. We're
Maybe that was it.
right, are they just not finding them because they're not outside? Or probably the number one cause of animals coming to me are hit by car. So people aren't driving as much. There's not as much road traffic. So are they getting hit by cars less frequently? So those things may.
Okay. Yes, because actually when we started with all this thing, well, Todos por el Mar, uh, I don't know, 4 months ago. How long was it, Tenja? It's
It's long enough. Yeah.
long enough. There was some penguins. It would like wild on the net. Some penguins walking in South Africa, on the street.
And Patagonia, that's
Yeah.
true.
Right.
Yes, and in Patagonia, and that's a very big change, no? Because animals started not being incarcerated, and now humans are, no. But That didn't last too long.
I was just gonna say, yeah, it didn't last very long for them. We were hoping that we have native mountain lion populations in Southern California, and so we have some that are very geographically isolated. Like if you've heard of P22 is a mountain lion that's stuck in Griffith Park, which is a very small territory, especially for an adult male mountain lion. And he got there at some point. He crossed several freeways to get there, but he can't get out now because he's surrounded by freeways and stuff. So he's not contributing to the population at all because there's no females in there with him. So I think everyone was hoping that maybe with less traffic, he would get out of Griffith Park, but he didn't.
There is one more question from Aranza. She wants to know, how does it feel to rescue so many birds injured or hurt and knowing human caused it?
Yeah, that's the kind of the hardest job, but it's also why I do what I do, is because the vast majority of the animals that come to me are there because humans have negatively affected them in some way. So it's frustrating. It's frustrating to see so much suffering because of the pressures that we've put on our environment and on wildlife. But it definitely gives me a sense of purpose. That's why I do what I do, is to help undo some of those negative pressures that we've put on wildlife.
Giving back a little.
Yeah. Trying to make up for the massive amount of wrong that we have done to our environment.
Just making a little extension of what you said is precisely, a lot of people ask me, why do you release so many seals to the wild knowing that the plastic situation has not been solved or is going to be killed by a killer whale or whatever? Why? Because I know what to do.
Right.
Because I cannot stand not doing anything if I know what to do.
Right.
That's simple. Okay, no more questions from Facebook?
Well, I have a very important question. Where is your dog?
Oh,
that's a very good question.
She's inside. She wandered out here for a second, but
supposed to be part of the staff, supposed to be part of the panel today. I'm disappointed.
Oh, Benja has a lot of pictures. Maybe he can show some.
None of them are rescue, just beautiful birds out of there.
Yes.
But a couple of them just to complement today's talk about seabirds.
Let me just get you some quick. Let me show the public what I show you at the beginning.
Beautiful frigate bird.
Oh,
They are mean. I remember them when I was a dolphin trainer back in Cancun. They were very, very good. I'm surprised of the eyesight. Stephany gave a very good explanation of their eyesight. They clean the fish out of your hands without touching your fingers. You have the dolphin fish in your hands, and they will dive and snatch it right from your fingers. Amazing. And you can smell them.
Yeah.
To their words, 'cause I like birds.
What is that song?
Downtown, crazy auto car gonna mow me down. Look at all the people like cows in a herd. Well, I like birds.
Even looks like a symbol or something like that.
It goes with the pictures.
Yep. I need to move to another directory to show you more. Hold on.
Good. Yep, double checking. No more questions on Facebook. And
let me know if any more come in that you need me to answer. I can. Do I just go? Do I just go on the page and?
Yes, if you want to answer some questions afterwards, sure. Not necessarily tonight. Look at that! Looking at you like what? Where's the song, Benjamin?
In the sky.
No, where is the song?
Oh, the song was Albert, not me.
Ah, you want to hear it? Wait, let me put it this way.
Search, I've got a theme for you to perch on. I can't stand in line at the store. The mean little people are such a bore. But it's alright if you act like a
Where are all those pictures from? Galapagos?
birds.
The first one were Galapagos, the dragons of Galapagos. And all of these are in the north of Yucatan.
Yeah, that mangrove environment. Look, this is Yucatan, this is el están.
Ah, this is Rio Lagarto.
Rio Lagarto is just around the corner.
On the other side of the peninsula.
Why are birds so bizarre? I love them.
Spoonbill. That's a really good spoonbill. I love it.
I like birds.
Next song, you're gonna find me a song. I like whales.
I like whales. I'm gonna look.
I like seals. I like dolphins, or I like mermaids. I don't know. Just a glorified dinosaur.
Those are nice.
Yep.
What did you take that pic
In Rio Lagartos, Yucatan.
in Yucatan? What's the normal lifespan of a bird?
Oh, it depends on the species. Yeah, anywhere from 6 years to 50.
Oh, wow.
Albatross, for example, they can live a long time, huh?
The albatross, yeah, I think the oldest albatross is in its 60s, I think.
About that or so.
Yeah.
The last one, the little one you had before, it looked like had little pants on or something.
Yeah.
Pantaloncitos negros.
What's the fastest bird?
The fastest is a peregrine falcon. Peregrine falcons are the fastest animal on the planet. So they've been clocked to diving at 250 miles per hour, 240 miles an hour.
Wow.
Whatever that is in kilometers an hour.
That's fast. Slowest bird?
I don't know.
Dodo bird, that's why they are extinct.
Dodo, yeah.
I heard that the penguins dive like 1,000 feet deep.
Emperor penguin can go down over 300 meters.
Yeah.
300 meters.
Over an hour.
Over an hour?
Yep.
Whoa. Like whales?
Like whales. Some whales cannot hold the breath that long.
Oh.
Well, dolphins. Some dolphins. Look at that. Good
Nice.
pictures.
I like that one.
And they are pink because of the Artemia salina. Sea monkeys.
You should do like a rescue together. You can go rescue birds and you can go rescue seals.
We did that for 3 months. That's precisely how I met Stephany.
Oh.
Yeah, that center in British Columbia also did some like terrestrial birds and mammals.
Mm-hmm. Y esas gallinetas de agua, ¿qué onda?
I like that one.
Yeah.
Mira que padre. That's for like, that's good. Like
Stephany, question, Stephany. Just looking at this picture in particular, even the neck itself looks articulated because of the vertebrae. We all know mammals, they do have 7 vertebrae in the neck. Do birds have the same number or it changes?
No,
According to the
it
species?
changes. Yeah, it's dependent on the species, but a lot of them have much more. Even birds that don't have what looks like a long neck will have more vertebrae. Like owls have usually about 14 vertebrae.
Well, that's because they look like the exorcists.
Yeah,
Albert.
that's how they can turn their head all the way around.
Albert, this is the fastest bird.
Yeah, in the shot.
You have evidence. It's a cryptid because the picture is blurry.
Very nice picture. How do you take that? What's the setting on the camera? How do you do that? You
I
keep an
do-
eye on the bird with a high setting, no?
No, I do a slow speed, and
Slow
I do
speed.
panning with the camera.
You do the panning. Okay, that's
Okay.
what it looks.
In other words, you
Speeding.
chase the bird with the camera,
Yes.
Yeah,
particularly
you move the camera with
the bird.
with the
With the
bird.
bird.
Yeah.
Nice.
Okay, I have
You
some.
like birds too. I'm gonna put you the song for you.
No, I like whales.
No, Benjamin. He likes birds.
Look at that. Nice. Fat, 40 pelicans. We had one in Cancun. The first one I helped rehabilitate was a pelican that had a very bad ripping here along the bag and the pouch. We call her Leaky. She was leaking everything. So we call her Leaky. We stitched the bag, and she, because it was a female, she remained with us for over a year.
What's that? A falcon.
Es un falcón, ¿no?
Falcon, no?
Let me
Is
see.
this Stephany?
I need to move.
There's penguins? No.
No.
I have the names on another list, but
Don't worry. Just put it. They're nice.
I mean, this is. I have to show you. Where is it? Hold on a second. We talked about the osprey. I have a great picture here of. I can't seem to find it. Well, this is the osprey, but I don't. This is not the picture I want to show you.
Make it. That's nice.
I have one.
Osprey are my least.
Oh, here it is. Look at this picture.
Least favorite.
Yeah. Eric, that's a really nice hunting photo. They are very difficult in captivity, though. They are not very smart.
Why not?
It takes them a really long time to figure out how to eat in captivity. Some of them never will never eat on their own in captivity. They injure themselves really easily in captivity. Like you have to put little pads on their wrists because they'll bash themselves in. They'll hit everything, even in a really big enclosure. Even in a giant space, they'll still injure themselves.
Not smart then.
They're not.
Not very smart. What about the vampire pigeon or what that lives?
Vampire parrot, no?
What?
Dracula parrot?
Yeah, the Dracula parrot.
Oh,
It's amazing.
I don't know. I've only seen pictures of them.
Those are crazy.
You just mentioned that this bird in particular is not precisely too smart. I remember a friend of mine in the Yucatan Peninsula used to work with parrots, rehabbing parrots. Parrots are supposed to be very smart and this and that. Well, he told me precisely they are not precisely smart because you can have one parrot standing on top of a mango screaming because he's starving and he's not going to take a bite from the mango. You need to feed the little bird. Not too smart.
Well, this is not related to birds, but it was on my same trip. So I'll end with a beautiful picture.
What is it? Octopus or what? I don't know. Whoa. What is that?
It's a good picture.
Tikal, what's that?
Chichen Itza.
Chichen Itza. Look at the night sky. Oh, that's a good trick.
How long was the
shot?
diaphragm opening?
Half an hour?
No. 15 seconds.
15 seconds?
High ISO and 15 seconds.
Wow.
15 seconds, that's a long time.
I want one of those for my office. Nice.
Sweet.
All right, guys.
Well, thank you.
Great, thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you, Stephanie. You did a good job, and I'm going to say this right in front of everybody. You have come a long way.
Thank you so much.
I met you like a little student, then I saw you as a beginner, a green doctor, and now look at you. I'm proud of you. Good job. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, thanks for having me. Let me know there are any other questions I can answer online later on?
Sure. You just stroll around our page, precisely under your presentation. You see any question you consider that is worth to answer? Go for it.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Actually, when we have like talks in English, because I translated on YouTube and put like subtitles in Spanish,
Oh, great.
you're gonna see a lot of questions there,
Okay.
and I'll give you
I'll send
the
you the link.
links to the pages. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, you might have to translate them for me.
Maybe, no, sometimes it translated.
Oh, it does it outright. Okay.
automatically. Yes.
Okay, cool.
So
Alrighty, cool.
it's easier.
Well, very
Right.
nice meeting everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
See you around.
so
Thank you
Meet you again somewhere around. Thank you, Stephany.
Thank you so much.
Gracias, Benjamín. Gracias,
Bye.
Albert.
Have
Thank
a
you,
good
everybody. Gracias a todos.
Bye.
Thank you, Luis. Thank you, Doctor. The doctor's not here right now, but thank you. Thanks everyone who helps us on the back, behind the curtains. Thanks. Well, she's gone. Thank you. Benja, thanks.
Señores, buenas noches. Gracias por venir. Espero les haya interesado y los vemos el próximo martes.
Y recuerden, todo esto lo hacemos por ustedes y todos por el. Gracias.
Buenas noches.